Welcome, everyone, to the Salted Orange podcast. My name is Matthew.
My name's Luke.
And Luke, why don't you help me tell the folks about why we're doing this podcast today? So what made you, what is this podcast? What are we doing?
Okay, this podcast is a Christian-based podcast where we're going to be talking about issues that affect our generation. Both of us are in our 20s, so we want to try to help our generation and not lose that generational gap that's happening.
Yeah. We've noticed that there's a bit of a decline within the church of people who are around our age, because I know there's not many of us attending church. So I thought this would be a good space to kind of allow for our perspective to be put out there and allow other people to access, maybe their faith and their religion, and maybe help deal with what they're going through as they're trying to finding their way through faith and understanding their journey with God. So
yeah, we want to encourage others in their faith because it can be a very scary world to go right into a church and ask people about their faith. So if you can maybe get a little bit of inspiration or anything from this podcast, it'd be great.
Yeah. So I think that's why we're here. And I think what might be helpful for us, Luke, as we are beginning and trying to figure out our faith, would be talking about how we came to where we are right now. So maybe let's talk about a little bit of our background in our Christian journey and how we ended up where we are. So
yeah, sure. My Christian journey is probably a lot like Matthew's. It's you grow up in church, and both my parents, my dad actually works in church. So I grew up in church through as a baby, and so now like it would be like that you would die if you didn't go to church in my family. So it was you get dragged to church out of bed. You may not want to go every Sunday, but you got to go. But then when I got maybe in middle school or 13 or 14 years old, my parents gave me the option. They said, if you want to go to church, you can go to church, but you definitely do not have to. So I think that gave me a way to make my faith something of my own and not just a parent's suggestion. I think I've definitely grown in my faith in my 20s, and I think my biggest struggle that I've seen in my faith is I get heartbroken when I see people my age not going to church that went to church when I was a kid, and I know it's probably just because they have lost their way a little bit, but I hope that maybe through a podcast or through them coming to church, they can help rekindle their light with God, hopefully.
yeah, I think that's something I liked about this idea of the podcast, because Luke came to me with the idea of doing it. And there's different ways that we access God. That's my interpretation of it, if you will. There's different ways we come to know God, and some of it might not be like a traditional path, like going to church service or attending Sunday school, but some of it might be, some kind of evangelical or work or evangelism, or meeting somebody even in awkward and weird places that allows you just to connect with God through that person. And a podcast like this could be a way to understand that too.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know I learn a lot from online. I mean, I'm a huge YouTube junkie. I watch YouTube every day. And I definitely get inspiration when I see pastors or when I see other Christian influencers on YouTube or on any other kind of social media, because I feel like they're at least trying to spread our faith. I think, which is a really scary thing, I think our faith is one generation away from extinction, which is very scary. I hope that's not true. I mean, we definitely don't want this podcast to be like just a rant that we think that, people need to get their act together and go to church. No, I think it is more we want to find out why people are not coming to church and why churches don't get that this is a serious problem.
Yeah. So you've talked about your background, obviously, so I should say a little bit about my own. I, like you, was raised in the church. It was a weekly practice, not a daily practice. But I was at church from the first moment that I can remember. Every Sunday we went, whether I was in sports or not, or anything else. Nothing got in the way of going to church. I was required to be there. My parents made sure I was there. They believed in a foundation within faith. It might not be like the thing that I stuck with, but they wanted to make sure I had a good foundation with my upbringing and with my development. So church was one of those places that taught good ideals in their minds to facilitate a positive and healthy life, which I still think that's true. And it definitely has formed me into who I am now because I've continued to go on the Christian path. I've done a lot of different work within churches. I've been a pastor. I've been working in youth ministry. I've been working in administration. I've pretty much done any job within the church. To put it, just to put it out there, it's been pretty much anything. And I have received formal training. Like I went to seminary, not specifically to do pastoral ministry or anything like that, but because I was curious about religion, I was curious about theology, and I wanted to learn more. So I might come across with some more like academic terms, but I honestly don't believe in just using the academic field to progress, because many people who are common folk and have not had the seminary training that I've had do not understand some of those big academic words and terminologies and what even people are trying to say. So I think this will help me out with that. It's one of my ways that I want to use like grassroots connections with people to facilitate a change in the church that will promote a healthy future and keep Christianity as a worthwhile endeavor for people that isn't just something you go to on a Sunday morning.
I definitely think that the grassroots approach is what we need to be doing in this podcast, just because the church is declining, and it's not helping that. I think there's some kind of overarching structure of church where sometimes it's almost like this is all behind closed doors. You can't see this behind closed doors. I think if we could be more open about our faith, I talk about this with youth all the time. I say that I think the way that you approach other people to tell them about your faith and intrigue them into your faith is you need to be more personable, and you need to just tell them your struggles. I think if you can't talk about the struggles of your faith, then you're just blind faith that is not genuine, because faith is not something that we can just do without struggle. I strongly believe that you have struggles in faith, because the struggles I've had is like you may see your friends not liking the faith that you're in, or you may see people just not like your faith, or people in the news or in any public setting just not supporting Christianity, which is very hard. And I also think that if you can't put that armor on, as I would say, because a lot of times in the Bible, God talks about armor, and he talks about being, the sword for him. And I think if you can not, prepare yourself for that, then you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to share your faith, and you won't be able to. People will see you as a false follower, as I would say.
Yeah, I liked a few of the things you said there, specifically with the connection to being yourself. I've been doing a lot of work lately in my own thought process of faith, and realizing that it is an authenticity issue that we're having within the churches. So often we show up to the building and kind of like it's like a check mark. You go in, it's like I went to church this week. Check. It's not I went to church and I got fulfilled because my faith grew, or I was challenged by the message, or I felt a spiritual connection through God via whatever the ministry of the worship service was. It's just kind of a passive thing that you're like, okay, my parents told me I had to do this, or I feel a connection to this church or these people that I have to be here, and I feel like if I don't show up, somebody's going to notice and it looks bad for me. I feel like that's a lot of the reason people are going to church. And definitely authenticity is part of it, because how often are we in a setting where we're going to be talking to people within church? They come 5 minutes after the service starts and they leave 5 minutes before.
Exactly.
They do not stay around for like any kind of things afterwards or beforehand. And it's so hard to connect with people in that regard. You really have to make an effort to do so. And many of us just don't take that time to do it. We live in a society that is pushing a fast-paced agenda and perspective of life. You're always going, you're always doing something else. You always have the next thing to think about, and you can't really be present with the moment. And churches are losing out on that in the biggest space possible. Yeah. They have so much ability to connect people with each other in ways that you wouldn't do other places. You're not going to be talking about faith outside of the church walls for the most part, unless you're like really into evangelism, or you're that faithful and spiritual as a person. Because some people don't like talking about their faith, and that's just how they function. It's a difference, and in that space, it's kind of an offering of this protection of you're not going to be. Well, it should be an offering of this protection that you're not going to be judged, or you're not going to be seen in a different way because of what you have. Now, some churches don't do that well. And I mean, that's still part of the problem with this decline that we're experiencing. And I think it's a big part of why we're experiencing a loss in our generation. After like millennials and Gen Xers, that generation kind of started the shift as we see it with like Sunday school, and, Sunday school taught some lessons, but it wasn't in a way that obviously impacted those children to want to be a part of the church. It was like you're learning lessons, you're learning good morality and biblical stories. You have faith, you have a basis, but you're not really investing yourself into the community that is the church. And I believe firmly in the church is a community, and if you don't have that community, you're not experiencing your faith to the fullest degree you can.
Yeah, I even look at like what John Wesley kind of was going into when he was talking about the church. He said that we should be in lots of small group discussion,
right,
and that we should learn to talk about our faith. I think even in church, people are scared to talk about their faith, which is something I think everyone needs to learn how to do. Even if it is that you share your opinion and someone doesn't like it. Well, I mean, we're all there to share our opinions, and I mean, because faith is not one like singular thing. Like, we do not all believe the same thing. I mean, there's some core things that we believe, obviously. To be a Christian, you gotta, believe in Jesus and all that stuff. But I think that we all believe differently. Even me and Matthew believe some things differently.
I'd say we're pretty different, honestly.
Yeah,
we sound the same right now, but as this goes on, we're gonna get different opinions. It's gonna happen.
We both grew up in a Methodist denomination, though. You're more of in a non-denominational setting now. I'm still in a Methodist setting, but honestly, I don't feel that I am strong in the Methodist. I believe a lot of the foundations of it, but I guess I would call myself a Wesleyan, maybe. Maybe just because I believe that, I believe so strongly in small group discussion. I mean, we would do Bible studies in college, and the things I loved was asking hard questions. And I think in our generation, that's what people want to hear. They want to hear the hard questions. Especially with like all the things that go on the news where people talk about crazy, things that are happening. I mean, obviously our government doesn't work right all the time, but I think it's crucial that as the church And I'm not just talking about the Methodist Church or any of the other denominations. I'm talking about as Christians.
The global church.
Yeah, the global church. We need to be able to engage in people that are not Christians yet, or that are not open to those ideals yet.
Let me ask you a question about where we kind of wanted to go today, because we've talked a lot about our background and what brought us to this podcast, and we kind of touched on a point that we want to go to. We've talked about the church decline, and unless you have anything really foundational that you want to throw out there, I think we've covered it pretty well. Mm-hmm. But I want to know more about what you're seeing within our generation specifically, and how they don't show up to church anymore. Have you talked to people? Have they given you their experiences? What is the reason that our generation's not coming back to church?
I'd say like the biggest thing, and this is one of my strongest things that I would talk about, but I have a term that I use, and it's a very common term. It's called wounded worshiper. And I think this is affecting more than our generation. It's affecting the generation before us. And I'm not talking about the people in like their 60s or 70s or 50s, but that could have affected them too, obviously. But I'm more talking about the people from like 20 to 40. They've went to church and they've experienced rejection, or they've experienced, I'd say more of like, oh, I don't want to see this new idea. I don't want, this is my church. I can't change it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the people in their 50s and 60s saying that, but I think people in their churches sometimes they get so comfortable that they're scared to experience new people in their church or experience new ideas. At our church, we had a new service start that was more of like a contemporary service. I grew up in a very traditional background. We'll sing Amazing Grace and all these very, I don't know if you'd call them country music or country style hymns or what you would call it. But when that new service started, it really scared some of the older folks in my church. But I thought of it as a great thing. And there was some times in my life that I thought it was a horrible idea just because I thought it was a split in our church. I wasn't looking at it more as like, this is great that there's even people coming to this. I think more as I've grown older, I've decided that I don't really care where you go to church. I care that you go to church. And I care that you are making an effort to make your faith better. Because what ended up happening with that new service is we had some like little things happen that made it not structurally sound, and then it ended up falling apart, and we lost all those people to either other churches or they just wouldn't go to church anymore. And which I'm not saying that like them going to another church is a bad deal. Just as I said they're going to church, that's great. But if they end up not going to another church, that's a bad thing. Because that shows that their faith wasn't structurally sound and we didn't prepare them for the world. I think as Christians, we should be able to prepare other Christians for the world. Because, there's such a split between church and the world now that it's scary.
Yeah, you have a lot of good points there, and something I've been thinking about as we're going through this. If there's a question that either of us ask each other or you hear that you like, you can feel free to let us know your answers and your responses. If you're on YouTube watching us, there's a comment section down below. You can go down there, type your response, or if there's something you're curious about that we didn't really talk about, or maybe we touched on an idea and you want us to talk about it more, that might be another podcast topic for us to do in a later episode. So please let us know in the comments. If you're watching this, you're obviously not watching this on Spotify, but if you're listening to us on Spotify, I think we're going to be looking at doing a Twitter account, so you can follow us on Twitter and let us know that too. Of course, I'll plug all those again at the end, so that way you can follow us on all our platforms. But I just want to let that opportunity. So maybe you can let us know why you are having issues coming back to church, or what is keeping you from church, or what are you seeing within the church. Those three things would be our big points that we're talking
or
about.
Or
even
right that we can help you.
Yeah.
All of us would be, me or Matthew would be definitely willing to help anyone in the, like, especially if there's like just a topic you want us to go on about. Because there's definitely pastors. I mean, I know Matthew's kind of like in the pastoral role, but like, we don't want to be scared of any topic. No. So,
yeah, that's one of the things I really liked about what you were saying. And sorry to cut you off, but I feel like you were wrapping up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with the thing that I've done is like I've worked with some confirmation, so students that are just learning to kind of experience faith themselves, and they ask really tough questions. Like children and adolescents and young adults are very curious people, and we're always asking questions. I mean, I find myself asking questions all the time. And as you were saying, like we've backed off of the topics that are difficult, and it's partially I think because of our society that we're like, oh, we must know the answer because people see us as the expert. But we have to also admit that we don't know the answer too.
Yeah.
And that's part of being the authentic person that I think that we're called to be in the church. If we're not actively being like, well, I don't understand, what, like you ask me, what is God? I'm like, maybe I don't have a firm foundation on what I believe God to be, or who God is, or even if God has like what God would look like even. Like I don't have that firm and foundational to myself, but we can come through it together and we can explore it. And it's one of the conversations we've had with our confirmands that I really enjoyed, because you got to see kind of how they learned about God and what they perceive God to be, and then you allow them to kind of create their own space to learn. And I think that's another big thing that we have to worry about with the church is we are so focused on, I'm going to throw out a very academic term. We are so focused on traditioning our congregations rather than teaching our congregation.
What's that mean?
So the difference would be like traditioning is like, we want you to believe exactly the way that I believe. So like I would have this viewpoint. Like I have a foundation. I'm going to use Methodism because that's what we know. Like I believe in the tenets of Methodism, and the way to do church and the way to be a Christian is to follow these tenets of Methodism. There's not another path. But as you were saying, it's not our job to make sure that they stay within our church. It's our job to make sure it's our job. It's our job to make sure that the students and the children and even the new followers of faith, whatever age that may be, when they are coming to church and curious and wanting to learn about God, we need to give them a foundation that allows their faith to be strong enough that even if they don't belong in our church, like they don't find that to be their fit, they have the faith that they and the basis to go find another church that they feel like they can be a part of.
See, let me give you a so this summer I worked with some kids just talking about it was a Christian camp. But we talked about we would have like a Bible study session every day, which for kids that was like pain because they don't want to sit there and sit still. But you'll be surprised because on the last day of the week, this was on Friday, we'd been there for a whole week. We just went and did communion, and they didn't realize that was like a super serious thing. They didn't realize the stuff behind it. And so when we got in the Bible study after that, I asked them, I mean, this was completely off topic than what I was supposed to talk about, but I thought it was important. I said, do you really know what communion is? Do you know what we just did? Do you really know what baptism is? And you know what? I saw their eyes light up because they were interested. They wanted to know that stuff. And if we're scared to talk about that stuff, or we forget about it, or think that they just automatically should know it, then we're missing them. Because these kids want to learn. Especially if it's a serious topic and you make it serious. But I'm not saying you got to shove it down their throat. But I'm saying that you need to make it serious and say, hey, I learned this when I was a kid, and it changed my whole perspective. I mean, because I had one kid that I asked him I said, do you know what communion is? And he said, I have no idea. Do you know what baptism is? I have no idea. That's sad. We're at a Christian camp and they have no idea. And I'm not saying this kid came from a, church background like we did where, our parents taught us everything about faith. Now, I'm not saying that we follow everything that our parents believe,
No, definitely not.
but I'm saying that I feel that my parents gave me a foundation to my faith to where I
Right.
can make my own decision. And I think that's what we should give to everyone else. Our biggest thing with this podcast is we want to make sure that we're not, preaching to you guys. We don't want to like say, this is what you have to believe.
And that's hard for me to do.
Yeah. And we don't want to rant either. We don't want to sit here and say that this is our rant channel and say that it's, we hate the church, blah, 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 all this stuff. No. In my opinion, I love the church and I want it to grow. I mean, when you have that faith experience, I told the kids this summer, I said, when you have that experience, when you have that that point in your life when you feel the Holy Spirit, a lot of people in Methodism don't believe in the, like, you shouldn't get emotional at church and stuff like that. And I don't necessarily agree with that because I've been emotional at church before. Matthew's probably preached a sermon where he's cried in the middle of a sermon.
Oh yeah, I'm like the most emotional person when I get into the pulpit.
And
like I will cry, I will get angry, I will experience every emotion in the pulpit. And it's not because I'm trying to like use that as like a tool to promote my message or get what I'm trying to say across. It does help, and but it's an authentic reaction to what I'm saying. Because I know what I'm trying to say, and because I'm either frustrated with how it is currently, or I feel like it's something I really need to bring out, my emotion and my inflection changes based on what I need to say.
I also think we have no control over that too. I think that's the Holy Spirit moving in us. I really do. There was one time I love to sing, studied music in college, loved to sing. I didn't even study music, or I didn't even study singing in college.
Right.
But I wish I would have, because I love singing. But one time we were up there doing, I don't remember the song, obviously, but it was a contemporary music song. And we had just got done singing, and the youth pastor was getting ready to get up and say like a little prayer, or say like something. I don't remember what it was. But obviously, because it didn't happen, because I was crying during the middle of the song, but you couldn't tell because I'm not one of these people that's like, go crazy crying. But I stepped out of the crowd. We were lined up, and we were singing, and I was in the back because I'm a really tall guy, so I got to be in the back, obviously. So I walked to the front, and I grabbed the microphone out of my youth pastor's hand, and I said, I need to say something. And I basically poured my heart out to my church. Now, did they listen? I highly doubt it. But for me, that was God speaking through me. I think it made me pour out my emotions. Because it's really scary sometimes as a guy to use those emotions.
It's really scary as anybody.
Yeah, but especially in my family, you were grown up that,
Tough men.
bottle it, you're not going to use it at all. I mean, especially as I got older, I've learned to use my emotions, because obviously people want to see that. And I just remember that I was up there and I kept saying, I said, we need to get to this generation because these kids, they want to learn. And I was the same age as the kids that were up there, but I was saying that to them because they needed to hear that. These kids are they have faith powers. Like, by faith powers, I'm saying they have the Spirit moving in them. Mm-hmm. But if you let that die, then they will never come back.
Yeah. We have been doing a series recently on like how to restructure the church in a way that it gets our minds back around what the purpose of the church is and how we are being a community together. And I really wasn't planning on jumping into scripture context, but there is a conversation, and I've done just a short video of this recently for our social media, talking about how it's the youth that are leading us, because there's a passage in Isaiah that talks about all of these things that are happening, and they don't seem like they fit together at all. But the important part of that passage for me, that this time I read it around, was that a child shall lead all of them. And it's not that it's an adult. It's an elder of the church. It's a child. To me, that opens up my mind to the ideas that anybody can have the Spirit of God because all of us have God's Spirit within us as it is already. It's just how God chooses to use whatever God wants to use to make meaning of life and to allow your faith to prosper.
Think about the other times in the Bible that he's used a child. He used,
So
a,
many.
he used a child in the feeding the 5,000.
Yeah, his lunch.
You didn't have to use a child. I read that scripture the other day and I said, why did he even need to include it? Why was that important? That it was a kid. And I think they included it because they wanted to show that, small things can make big beginnings.
Right.
And there's other places, even in that, I even look in the Old Testament, it shows God using children.
Look at David.
Yeah.
David and Goliath. That's a child.
And I just think that, if we give up on this generation, we're done. Church is done.
Yes.
And that's a hard pill to swallow for people. But it needs to be swallowed because I talk about this all the time at my church. I say, if we were to start a podcast, because I've been talking to my church about wanting to start a podcast, I said, I don't want this just to be for our younger generation. I want the older generation to watch this and say, we need to listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you got to, step back and say, okay, guys, take over the church. No, I think what we need to say is, hey, let me stand there and help you. Let me stand there and be your... I would say, just think of the analogy of a lot of times I did this in high school. We did what's called a human table or a human chair, whatever you want to call it. It's where you have 4 people and, you got to link arms together to be able to make a chair for someone to lay on. So I always think of our current Christians or people that are strong in their faith need to be a stepping stone or a chair for people maybe in the younger generation or people that are just new to experiencing faith. Because they can bring a lot of new things.
I think, you bring up a really good point of I love what you said about if we give up on this generation, that the church is done. That's not a question. That's not a question mark at the end of that. That's a statement. Because if we give up on this generation, it's gone. I haven't talked about the church decline in a sense, but every generation you're losing more and more people. 3 generations ago, you might have had 100. Let's say you had 100%. You had 100 kids. Generation after that, maybe 30. Generation after that, 5. It's constantly losing children every single generation, and it's not that they're not coming back because we're not having children. We have one of the highest populations we ever had in the world right now, but it's because we have not built those impacts of this is a good foundation for living a good life. And having God and faith as your center is how you need to proceed. We have put in, hey, this is a time that children can go eat marshmallows or have a pizza party, or we're going to go take the kids bowling or something like that. We're going to have fun with the kids and not actually form them. We didn't give them the basis they need to be like, oh, this is an important part of my life and I want to pursue it actively in my future.
I think a big thing that people are talking about in church right now is how do we get people into church?
And everyone's like, youth ministry. Let's go back to youth ministry. Let's go back to Sunday school the way it was. And I'm like, it's been 50 years. That hasn't worked. Obviously, it's not working.
Well, I almost think of it as I was talking about this with one of my friends. I said that we almost have to treat the church like, an advertisement agency nowadays.
Yeah.
We have to say, okay, we have the newest coffee shop, or we have the newest music. We have this new sound system. At our church, we had to put in a new sound system. We needed a new sound system, obviously. This thing was old. But people just got excited that we got a new sound system. And I was like, why is that the thing bringing you back to church?
Yeah.
Why do we need to entice you with other things?
Right.
Why? And this is a huge topic. I don't necessarily know how you think about this, but I think a huge thing that people believe is that there was like a huge movement back maybe in the 2000s when contemporary churches started to pop up.
Sure.
About like, oh, you can come to this church and dress up however you want. You can come and be, wear blue jeans and all that stuff. Which, honestly, I don't care what you wear at church. As long as you got clothes on, obviously. But I think that's a stupid excuse.
Right.
It's a stupid excuse. People just bring that up so that way they can say, oh, I can't go to church because I'm not wearing a suit. Big whoop-de-doo. I own 2 suits. You know how many times I've worn it to church? 0.
Yeah. No, I get that, and I'm actually like, as the time of we're recording this, I'm actually preaching in the coming Sunday, and I'm thinking about it, and you're talking about literally where I'm going with my message, and it's like I don't care what it looks like for you to show up. I just want you to show up. Mm-hmm. Like you can have everything wrong with your life, and not even be close to God. But if you show up, if you come to the building, or you come to the space where you can hear God's message, it doesn't even have to be a building. Honestly, I'd hope it wasn't a building. Because the building itself is a problem sometimes.
Yeah.
But like if you can hear somebody presenting God to you, and you're just showing up to that space, that's what's going to make the impact. It doesn't matter what you come and look like. I remember I explore social media way too much. And I remember there was a TikTok that I watched, and it was like, I don't care. Let me find the right message. It was somebody trying to come to the church. They're like, well, do I have to give up smoking to come to the church? It's like, no, just come to the church. It's like, but I need to make sure, like, I really feel like I need to get rid of this habit so I can come to the church. And it's like, no. It's like, think about it this way. When you go to take a shower, what do you do? Are you preparing yourself? Are you like lathering yourself up before you get in or anything like that? Mm-hmm. No, you just show up. You just show up in the shower, and Jesus acts as the water and the soap that's in there, and Jesus is what's cleaning you, not you getting rid of stuff. It's gonna be Jesus working through you. And if smoking is part of your process of exploring your faith, Jesus is gonna work within you to get rid of that. But it might not be your process, but Jesus will take care of all those things for you. And I hope that's helpful for you as you're exploring your faith out there.
I also want to I want us both to maybe you can go first, but I want you to maybe think of a specific time or a specific maybe experience where you felt God through a struggle in your faith. So maybe somewhere where you almost were like, I hate God.
Yeah.
Because there's people in this world that say they hate God. I know that's a huge thing to say, but there are people that say that.
I'm just glad they think there's God.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely a big struggle with our faith. And I think that's part of why I think that is part of our growth as Christians, is to experience the struggle. Jesus never said it was going to be easy. He said, "Come to me, and you're going to get rest. You're going to get rest, but you're not going to be easy." Like Jesus was very revolutionary in his approach to everything. He was against what the common people believed in the church, and so he had different opinions. So I think that is a big part of just experiencing faith. You're gonna have those struggles, and it's how you go through it. Like I did a study through Job not too long ago, and it's Job, despite the fact that he's lost his family, like everything is gone in his life. He's still praising God and still thanking God for even being a part of having God in his life.
I even think of Paul then too.
Yeah, Paul's
the same way. I mean, he was in prison for, I don't even know how much. You probably know how
Too many.
exactly.
Most of his ministry.
Most of his life. And I mean, he wrote freaking like 4 sections of the Bible in prison.
Right.
I have a friend who works in the prison, and he said he sees more God in the prison than he does when he's outside the prison. Yeah. Isn't that scary?
I mean, it's less distraction, that's for sure.
But like that we can't even do better than our prisons. That's what scares me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like even now today I have had struggles with my faith where I've like, you know, why do I even still believe in this?
Talk about it.
And I think that if we don't have a strong support system behind us, then a lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard to keep your faith by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why I'm such a strong Wesleyan supporter, is because I so strongly believe in being a group of faith, like a small group of faith. Because honestly, I talk about this with my parents all the time. But I said this when we were at a youth conference one time. I said, I was standing in front of some youth, and I said, they asked me about my parents, like, you know, how we feel about our parents. And I said, you know what? I think of my dad less of as a. I mean, I still honor him. You know, I still follow the golden rule. I honor my father and mother, but I think of my father as my best friend now.
Right.
And when I think that way, I'm thinking more of like he's struggling the same way I am. When you're a kid, you don't see that.
No.
I mean, you do, but you don't understand it the same way they do. But I think when you get maybe like 18, 19, 20, you start to see that they have the same struggles you have. They are still questioning their faith as well. And I think that's where I've struggled with my faith lately, is that I've been really just trying to discover what is my calling in faith. I mean, I don't want to just be a Sunday morning worshiper. I want to be an everyday worshiper.
Right.
And a lot of preachers are talking about this now. Or if they're not, they need to be. They need to be talking about what is your past Sunday morning experience with God. Is it just you come, and you said this earlier, punch your ticket in, say I'm in church. But that's my biggest struggle right now, is I'm having to hear these messages and I'm like, why are they not working? Mm-hmm. Why are people not doing this? And so I think with our podcast, we just want to try to find a new way to reach people. I mean, obviously we want to try to reach people in our churches, but I think this can be a way for the people in our churches and for also just people that are out there to experience our growth in faith, and also our kind of like opinions as we, you know, kind of debate each other. I wouldn't say debate because we're best friends, but I would say as we try to be a small group of faith and grow in our faith. Right. And a lot of you might be asking, you know, why is this podcast called the Salted Orange Podcast?
Can I jump in with? I didn't ever really talk about what I struggle with, and I know you asked that
Oh
question.
yeah.
So we'll jump that in real quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, you asked like really like one area, and I think a lot of people who are in like our age demographic, like your Gen X, Gen Z, millennial, we're still trying to figure it out. Those people are still trying to figure it out. Like my biggest problem with faith that I've had, and the thing that pushed me the farthest away from it, was when I was young, I got told that I wasn't allowed to be in the positions I was seeking to be in. Like I got caught on fire by God really early in my life. It was when I was in middle school and going through confirmation and stuff. Like I wanted to preach, I wanted to teach, I wanted to explore God, I wanted to know everything I could possibly do about religion. So I learned how to. I was preaching at 13. I was a full-time pastor at 19. I was doing all these things, but the thing that kept pushing me back, that I kept running into, no matter what situation I was in, no matter what job I was doing within the church, it's like, you're not old enough to do this yet. Like, come back when you're 30, or come back when you've had experience, but you're not old enough to do this yet. And I think that's one of our biggest problems with youth. We said this last week in our sermon on Sunday. It was, we've told youth that they have a place down the hall. There's a nursery or a Sunday school room for them, and their place is not within the context of the church. And the sad part about that is they believed us.
Yeah.
They believe that that's where they belong and not within the church. And when you get older, I can go back into the church now. But by the time you've got to the age that you're accepted, you've already been so hurt by not being a part of the community that you don't want to come back.
And that's why I talk about that wounded worshiper. I mean, that wounded worshiper, that term, it fits so well with everyone that goes to church in our age.
Right. Because
they have just been hurt by church. And a lot of people, especially sometimes myself, we only go to church, and I think that I'm going to say this because this is just exactly what you said.
Okay.
We go to church through obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you know you're a wounded worshiper, is that you go to church through obligation. Because you don't care if someone hurts you. I'm not saying you need to leave that church, but I'm saying you need to ask yourself, why do I actually go to church? Yeah. Is it because I'm hurt? Is it because I need to know God? Because honestly, you learn something new at church every Sunday, even if the preacher preached the same message every Sunday, you still would learn something new every Sunday. Mm-hmm. Because you would find something new you'd be able to pick something new out of everything. But if you just go to church and you're like, well, I'm there to see Billy Bob Jr., that wants me to be at church every Sunday. Yeah. Well, you're not going for the right reason.
Yeah, I think we're going to check off a checklist that says we went to church on Sunday. But a deeper question for me is thinking about what actually gives you salvation. Is it, my faith is, I will be saved if Jesus isn't taking attendance. Like, you can not show up to church for a long time and still be saved, at least in my opinion of salvation. But the people who think salvation is just showing up and attending church, how are you living your faith? Mm-hmm. What does that look like outside of those time periods? Yeah, as we were talking about. It's really, how do you live beyond Sunday morning and have faith still? It's not just a Sunday morning thing. You really have to go beyond that.
Yeah, and I think we're not saying that, you have to live the perfect life.
No, of course not. No. Nobody can.
And I think a lot of churches, they think when you got to live that perfect life, it's got to be, you can't make any mistakes. And when you do, you're gone. Sometimes they do believe that, especially, I wouldn't say at my church, but in the southern part of the United States, I would say that's very true. Yeah. I mean, that may not be factual, but in my personal experience, I believe that. And I think that's where that wounded worshiper term that I use all the time comes from. It comes from, I've done something wrong, but I still want to worship God.
Yeah.
And I said this in a sermon. I've only preached maybe twice in my life, but I said this in a sermon a little while ago. I said this actually at the end. It was like the postlude or whatever.
Takeaway.
Yeah, the takeaway. That's what I would call it. I said, don't let this church be a prison, but let it be open doors. And I think that can be a prison to the outside, but also a prison to the inside. Mm-hmm. I said that don't let the people in here get so obsessed with that this is my church. No one can come to and change my church. Mm-hmm. That it becomes a prison. But I said that to make it open doors, I mean, let's let the people that have tattoos in. Let's let the people that are drug addicts. Let the people that are, having problems in their life. Let's let them come in and experience this faith and ask God what life is about. Because I believe, this is my strong belief, I said we would have nothing without God. We would have no life.
What's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? Exactly. And I think, see, because when I grew up, you had an experience where you were very, spiritual all the way through your life. I mean, you just said that you were very, evangelistic when you were young.
Right.
I didn't have that. I mean, I liked going to church, obviously. I liked more the music part of it because, I have a music background and stuff like that. But I guess I didn't really get the meaning of it. I did, but I didn't. I didn't really. I guess I was more on the obligation part of it. My dad worked in the church, so I knew I had to be there every Sunday to support him.
Yeah.
But I think as I've gotten older, I think probably this started maybe when I was a senior in high school. I started kind of asking myself, I'm like, why do I go to church? Because I'm getting ready to go to college, and this is what I, hate the most. And this is a strong word, hate, right here. I hate when people go off to college and they lose their faith. It scares the heck out of me because I saw so many of my friends do that. And that's why when I got to be a senior in high school, I really wanted to ask myself, I'm like, why am I still going to church? And so I still continue to go in college, and I would ask myself the question every Sunday. Because there was, in college, when you go to college, you have nobody saying, you got to go to church. You got to go to church. It is completely your decision. Because especially when you have a big old paper coming up on Monday, you definitely don't want to go to church on Sunday. But I would, I made that effort to go to church. And I think our pastor has really been talking about, especially since I've gotten back from college, he's been talking a lot about like making your faith be a journey. And I think a lot of people need to hear that because a lot of people people think they've already made it.
Yeah.
They think they've made it to church. They're and I wouldn't say it's just the older generation that believes that. I would say that they need to reevaluate that and say, how can I change that? How can I make it a journey? I think of like the books like The Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Do you remember there's a scene from The Hobbit, actually, which is, the one before it, where you see Bilbo like running in the field and he says, I'm going on an adventure. I always think about that in my faith. I'm like, what would I be like if I was holding my little map and running and saying, I'm on an adventure? But I want my faith to be like that.
Yeah. I think all our faiths should be like that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Well, I think we've covered a lot today, and I hope you have found something significant out of it if you've been listening this long, and I appreciate it if you have been listening this long. And I'm curious about your tradition with the church and how you experience your faith. So a really important question I think we've asked today is why do you go to church?
Why do you still go to church?
Why do you still go to church, or why do you not go to church?
Yeah.
If that's the case for you, I'm interested to let us know. You can hit us up on our Twitter account, or you could leave it in the comments of our YouTube video. If you're watching this on Spotify, either of those places are available for you. Of course, with YouTube, it's just easy to go down in the comments and type that out.
Mm-hmm.
And while you guys are looking for places to follow us on, make sure you're following us on our Spotify if you want to hear this through that. I know a lot of people like to use Spotify to listen to their podcast nowadays, so please make sure you're checking that out. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. There'll be the same kind of content. You can still listen to it podcast style. There's not going to be there's a graphic that you'll see of our logo.
We talked about maybe doing video, but we don't know yet.
We don't know yet. Right now, this is what it is. So please do it there. And you can follow us on our social media on Twitter. So please go check all that out. There's one last topic that I want to talk about before we get out of here. And you started to go into it, and I stopped you because I didn't finish doing whatever else we were talking about throughout the podcast. But I think it's best for you to tell this story because it affected you personally. So tell us, why is this the Salted Orange Podcast?
Okay. So we were sitting talking about what we wanted to name this podcast, and we were like, "Oh, we can't." I thought you can't make it just like a Christian name. We can't just say the Lord's Podcast or something like that. And that's probably already been taken and stuff like that. And I was like, why don't we call it the Salted Orange Podcast? And I said that because the way me and Matthew met was with salted oranges. So we were in a program in high school called Governor's School for the Arts, and
music based.
Yeah, music based, obviously. And so we went to the lunchroom, and I was sitting there, and I was with some other friends that I already made.
We had the same friend group.
Yeah, and so every day I would get a freaking plate of oranges. I loved freaking oranges. I am a orange fanatic, and so I would get a plate of oranges, and they would be cut in half, and they would be sitting out there. And so I went and put my plate of oranges on the table, and so then I went back to get like a drink or something like that, but I can't remember. And so while I was gone, this man decided to sprinkle a mound of salt on top of it. A mound. But you couldn't see it. And so I went and got my drink. And so I came back and I went to go bite into the one half of an orange. And I was like, I was like, this is terrible. And I said, what is on it? And everybody just started laughing. And I was like, this is salt on top of it. And so then I told Matthew, I said, you have to eat all of them. Since you salted them all, you have to eat them all. And so he ate every single orange. And so then after that, we were just so good of friends and stuff like that. And so we just want to make this a podcast where we're like, where we're talking about our friendships and we talk about our spirituality. Because even when we were in college and stuff like that, we talked about our spirituality. So we just want to make this podcast, a friendly zone where you can talk about your faith.
Yeah, I refer to Luke often as he's my spiritual and religious friend that I can have these conversations with, because there's other people out there who either haven't experienced faith that I'm friends with, or aren't as connected or aren't as connected to me in a intimate way like Luke and I have been, because we've been friends for a while now. It's probably been almost
9 years, maybe
almost a decade at this point.
We'll say 10.
Yeah, and I think the name, and I was like, I'm like, salted orange is like, that's kind of weird. I'm like that's nobody's
not religious at all.
Who's gonna click on that? And I thought about all these things, and I'm like, well, it actually fits the core of like kind of what we want to do with this podcast. We're getting together. It's two friends just talking about what we want to do with what's going on with religion, something that we're both passionate about, we care deeply about. And it's not hiding anything. It's not like we're putting on a facade, or
we're hardly editing.
We're not.
This is going to be, you're going to hear all the mess ups and everything.
Yeah. Sorry about the crashing kitchen in the background. Like something thrown into the sink, but we wanted to make it a personal connection. So sharing this about us, you get a little bit of insight into our friendship. And obviously I'm not a deviant as I was back then, even though I was kind of peer pressured to put the salt on the oranges. But we wanted to make it personal. And as we were saying earlier, like it's an authentic connection that we have. And if we're not being authentic with this podcast, there's no reason for us to do it, because
it's no different than any other podcast.
It's no different from any other podcast. It's no different from just going to punch your ticket at church every Sunday.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure we had all of that situated.
So let us know if you want to have some video maybe in the future. We obviously live super far away from each other, so it would be on online, but still it'd be really fun. But we're gonna try to continue to do the audio form, so that way you guys can listen in on our conversations.
Yeah. And let us know what was most helpful for you if you experienced something that, I never thought about this way, that we talked about. And of course, if there's something, as we said at the beginning, like if there's something you want us to talk about that you're like, oh, I like what they've said so far and I'm curious what they think about this.
Oh, and you can critique us. Matthew may not want to see it, but I'll look at the critiquing.
I will take their critiquing with a little bit of salt.
Yeah, a little bit of salt.
Well, we hope you have enjoyed the podcast. Thank you for tuning in with us. Again, check out all our socials, as we've mentioned, YouTube, Spotify, and Twitter to stay connected with us. And we're looking forward to seeing you guys in a future episode and more installments as we go.
And just remember, God will always be with you.
I got nothing else to add, so.